What impacted me the most was just the brutality of the killing. No one should lose their life to senseless violence, but to lose it in that way at such a young age. She hadn't experienced anything. So to know that baby went through what she went through alone is heart-wrenching. From the moment I first heard about it, because some of the pictures that I saw when I first started looking into, I didn't see the ones that we actually have. You just saw pictures of her bound hands and little bitty fingers. But after doing this documentary and seeing everything that I saw through the research, is to know that people can be that brutal, and I'm at a loss for words almost. It's horrible. It's horrible.
Welcome to St. Louis in Tune with Arnold Stricker and Mark Langston, where we size up current and historic events involving people, places, and things in areas such as the arts, crime, education, employment, faith, finance, food, health, history, housing, humor, justice, and sports. Our weekly podcast originates from and connects the gateway city to our country's current cultural fabric and lives. I remember an incident back in 1983 that was particularly disturbing, and it was disturbing to the metropolitan St. Louis area because it was the murder of a young girl, and it wasn't just a murder, it was a decapitation murder. And it wasn't just a decapitation murder, but the fact is that her body has never been claimed. She's never been identified. And it's horrific when parents find a child who has gone missing or an individual of a family member has gone missing, but when that family member is never found, it creates this uncertainty. When that individual is murdered, that even creates more of an uncertainty, or people who are found somewhere and never claimed. And in studio, we have Lee Barber, who's assistant director of a movie, and Shelby Sosa, who's cinematographer of the movie that has been produced by Edrar Bird Sosa. He's founder of 314 Bird Studios. The movie's and the project's called Our Precious Hope, St. Louis's Baby Jane Doe. Welcome to St. Louis in Tune.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you for having us.
I saw this documentary. It was sent, and I know for those of you who are wanting to maybe get some information on this, you can go to 314birdstudios.com. The movie, the documentary, is on Roku, YouTube, and Amazon Fire TV. So I guess I'll start with both of you. What was the drive to do this? Because this happened well before both of you were born. And like I said, I remember this, so that kind of dates me a little bit. Right. But what was the drive? What was the impetus behind producing this and getting this on film?
The drive really was that we wanted to raise awareness, first of all, because it is sad that someone goes missing and we do not recover them if they do go missing. And also to give her a name, because it's been so long that she has been in the system without a name, and that is what we are trying to portray. We want to raise awareness to get her name, so in case her family was looking for her and they did not find her yet, we can finally give them that piece that they deserve. The drive for the movie was that I hope my dad is okay with this. He actually had caught COVID when COVID came, and he was scared that he was going to not be here with us. So he said if he did get it, he was going to sell it, buy movie equipment, and we're going to shoot a documentary to raise awareness. He got COVID, sold his car, and we're here today.
He's a man of his word.
Right.
What fascinated him about this particular story?
It happened when he was a child, I believe, in the 80s, and my grandma, his mom, would scare him, say, you got to come home when you get out of school. They're cutting little kids' heads off. They might kidnap you. So he was afraid of that, and that always stuck with him. So when he had a chance to do something positive with it, he ran with it.
That's wonderful. Lee, what about you? What kind of interested you in this particular project?
Well, it was done. It interested me because it was a year before, after I was born, so it was like, okay, that was 83 and I was born in 82. So I always had interest in it just because of the fact that it was someone that was never identified. And it was a child. And to be murdered the way that she was, it was gruesome. So I always wanted to, because it was something that was in my own backyard, which is St. Louis, I just wanted to make sure that the people from our city actually knew about it because it was, and when I met Shelby and her dad, and they had the same motivations, and it was like the stars aligned and the clouds open and go forward.
Now, I love that the fact that your dad did what he did. Not that he got COVID, but that he was true to his word, and he did this. And the beauty of nowadays with phones and everything like that is anybody can make a documentary. Did he have any prior training, or did you all have any kind of prior training like that?
I went to school for TV and radio, and unfortunately I haven't found my field with using that. I've done a lot of other things. But when he did that, he said, I want to make a documentary. And there was my chance. And I said, here we go. Fast forward, we're here today.
And you ran with the opportunity.
Yes.
Now, what obstacles did you find along the way as you were doing what you were doing with the cinematography?
A lot of people in St. Louis don't necessarily like women in the field. They more so want a masculine person. That's one of the things that I've ran into. Or they don't trust a woman's word on some things. It's a masculine field, so it's hard to get into that. Now, the ladies that are into that, I do look up to them, and I hope I have a spot one day. But until then, I am working to get it, and I'm working very hard for it. So hopefully, if anybody's hiring, I am looking.
There you go. Lee, what was yours? Did you have any kind of background with that?
Well, actually, I own a company called Acting, and me and Bird actually met on a set. I was producing an internet comedy sketch show, and he was a main character on a couple of the episodes, and he saw that it was me and a friend of mine, and he was just like, man, I like your drive, I like what you do. And he's like, my daughter just graduated with a communications degree, and she's looking to get into the industry. Would you mind if she came and did some shadow work with you? And come on. And I brought him in. Shelby started coming and filming, and before I knew it, Bird, have you ever thought about starting a TV station? And I was like, no. And he was like, I just sold the Benz. I'm getting all this equipment. With your equipment and my equipment, we can do it. And I was like, okay, let's do it. And after we wrapped with the internet comedy sketch show, we went in full production under 314 Bird Studios in collaboration with Acting a Fool Productions. And we brought you guys Precious Hope, our Precious Hope.
Wow. Now let's get into the storyline a little bit so people can understand. I don't want to give anything away. No spoilers here, okay? Because people need to watch it.
Right.
It is not for young children.
Yeah, we try to keep it PG-13.
Yeah.
It's pretty graphic.
It's pretty graphic. There are no photographs of her per se without a head. I just want to give that out there. But there are. I obviously didn't catch it, so.
Yeah, there's one.
Okay. Yeah. All right, I didn't catch that. So, folks, just want to warn you out there. And some of the things we may say today may upset some people. But this is unfortunately how life has been. And for this particular girl, this is what she experienced. So we want to try to find some closure for that. So let's talk about the storyline a little bit and what you found out. And so take us back to the beginning, if you will.
The beginning, when we were Googling it, we actually watched a couple of YouTube videos, and then when we drove around the area that she was in, we found some stuff that wasn't correct from the YouTube videos. So that's what made us more interested, because they're not from our city. They don't know our day-to-day life. They don't know how we interact with each other and things like that. So that would help us, aid us into some of our questions in ways that we wanted to know the type of information and to be able to bring the video the way that we wanted to present it. Let me see. Do you have anything to say, Romeo, with that?
And so in the beginning of the story, the way the police got in was two guys. They were supposedly their car broke down, and they went into a building to try to find stuff to work on to prop the hood of the car up. And so that's what they told the police. But as they went into the cellar, they got into the area of the basement where the furnace room was. And it was just too dark to see, so one guy decided to use his lighter to get light in the room and happened to look down and discovered her body. And so they take off, they call the police, and that's how the police got involved.
And I was surprised at the amount of footage, like video footage from back then. I didn't know that they took a lot of video footage back then. I figured it was just photographs, but it was amazing that you had actual footage, and you had to get that from the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department?
Well, we got most of the footage was the news footage.
Okay, gotcha.
And I believe that it was, and this is just speculatory, this is just my opinion. I believe that it was a lot of video footage, because it was such a gruesome case. They had to scour neighborhoods to make sure every child in that neighborhood was accounted for. And after they discovered, and then on top of trying to make sure every child is accounted for, they had to scour and look through sewers to try to discover her head. Because with me and Bird, we like to say her head and neck, because she was decapitated at the shoulder level.
Right.
So,
it wasn't just her head, it was her neck also.
Correct.
Which is really gruesome.
Correct.
This is Arnold Stricker with Mark Langston of St. Louis in Tune. We're talking to Lee Barber and Shelby Sosa, who are familiar with the movie documentary, Our Precious Hope, St. Louis Baby Jane Doe, as the cinematographer and assistant director. I wanted to read a little bit from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch back in the day. This is back in 1983, because this particular incident occurred in the 5600 block of Clemens Avenue, which is near the old St. Luke's East Hospital. It's right behind that. That's just a little bit north of that. Mm-hmm. But her body was discovered, as you were saying, Lee, by two men. And there was an autopsy, and there's a lot of other things that go into this story that are unusual. Information about how she died, mm-hmm. where she died, the condition of her body. And again, I don't want to give anything about the documentary away. Can you give enough to have a little conversation about that and some other little things that may not be in the documentary that you could discuss with us?
One of the things is that with TV today, everything with all the forensic shows we see, people think that things are just solved right then and there. But in 83, forensics was not what it is today. It was so hard to get DNA from the child because her body was completely devoid. It was void of blood. It was drained all out. The only blood that was there was the blood on the wall from when they might have bumped when they brought her in. But that was it. And so they don't know where she was initially killed. They didn't have any way to trace it back to where they could possibly even think where this could have happened. So with what made the case so eerie is because it was like kids played in that building.
Right. They
would run in and out. It hadn't been vacant that long. It was a couple years, but it wasn't like in complete disrepair. It was like just one day somebody goes in there and just, boom, there's a child that's not even from this area. And that's what made it the more, it was just such a horrendous thing because all these kids in this neighborhood, that could have been any one of them.
Absolutely.
And the condition of the body was another thing that the police were like, okay, we know this is a fairly recent death, but like how recent, they narrowed it down to, I believe it was within, 5 days?
Yeah, a week to 5. Wow.
That she had actually been in that building. And so they knew it wasn't long. And then, but her stomach content was empty, so she hadn't
eaten.
They had her stay. She had starved. Well, not starved, but she went hungry before they did whatever they did to her. So there was no way. I guess I look at it like they weren't the dumbest criminal because to have her stomach be empty, like they thought about it. They thought about what they were going to do and how they were going to.
Which is very interesting that you say that because a lot of people, I'm just speculating now, wouldn't go to that degree. So they knew an autopsy would reveal stomach contents or would reveal if she cleaned or because they were able to get fingerprints from her.
Correct.
And ultimately DNA from her.
Yeah.
But that's after many years when that technology finally came on the scene. And I think sometimes, like you were saying, Lee, we watch these shows on television and we think, oh, man, it's going really fast. It does not work that way at all. It does not work that way.
Not at all.
And she was just clothed in a sweater, and she was bound, her hands behind her back.
Correct.
And then after the detectives had really done a canvassing, they did a very thorough, it seemed to me, canvassing. Matter of fact, they accounted for every child in the metropolitan St. Louis area.
Correct.
Yes, and wasn't it the Illinois area too?
That's an incredible way to do that because the way kids move in and out of schools
exactly.
and how the records are never up to date, and the fact that they were able to get that because that really eliminated that this girl had to come from outside the state area.
And talking with one of our collaborators, he's actually in the documentary. His name is Eric. He was a resident of the area at the time of the murder. He was a 10-year-old child. And for him, he gave us a real good breakdown of how the school system was set up in that time frame.
It was very dysfunctional.
Yes. And so for the police, people want to discredit them. Especially with this investigation. They feel like they didn't do enough, but I think they did all they could do with going from non-computer. The schools weren't computer, so they had to keep up with these students on paper. But luckily they did run into some that were computerized, so it did make it a little easier. Mm-hmm. To go to every school in the St. Louis area and look for all these children, they're accounted for. Then to expand it and go out to other surrounding areas and they're accounted for. Then to take it nationwide, I think they did a phenomenal job.
Law enforcement always wants to look for patterns, or maybe
Correct.
There's somebody else in another state that has had a similar
Correct.
kind of murder, an incident like that. The fact finally she had been in the morgue for 9 months. Nobody had claimed her.
Yep.
And then she ended up getting buried in Washington Park Cemetery, which has a whole nother story.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother documentary on it. And finally, talk a little bit about that particular thing, because that has a little, it seems like this particular story of this young girl has one thing after another that is like an obstacle for her.
It seemed like even in death she couldn't escape nonsense.
Yes.
Yeah.
You want to tell them about the cemetery, or you want me?
The cemetery that we went to, now today they said that they've run into a lot of supplying issues with keeping the grass cut, keeping the maintaining of everything. So if you do go past there, it's by the Renaissance. It's the by Waffle House by the Renaissance. It is in disrepair. The grass is growing over tombstones. They've actually buried people on top of people. And weren't we told that it was a couple of legends buried there?
There's 5 slaves there. There are people from the Spanish-American War.
Now, I will tell you, as long as I remember that cemetery, it's always been like that.
Mm-hmm. Really?
Yes. And that cemetery is up by the airport.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
It's up by Natural Bridge, and what is that? Brown Road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly, Brown Road.
I believe, I'm not for sure, it's just mostly talk I've heard, but the lady who owned it had passed away or something, and she was trying to give it to the city, and the city didn't want it or something like that. And that's why it's in disrepair right now, because that's the issue they've been running into. Trying to get volunteers to help clean up the area, but it's so much because of no one's been able to take care of it that it's very hard. The little bit of help they do get, they can only clear but when you go further in there, you cannot see all of the tombstones and everything. There's trees growing over it. There's grass. We actually found one of the people who were cutting grass. He was there the day that they buried her, and he helped us find her tombstone. Without him, we would have never found it. We weren't even in the right area.
And she didn't even have a tombstone for a while.
It was a school in East St. Louis that raised money, and they raised that money and donated a headstone for her. Mm-hmm. And when they placed the headstone, because they placed it in the wrong spot. So they literally placed it maybe 3 feet from her, diagonally. So it was a mess. But the woman that actually was running the cemetery at that time committed suicide because she was coming under investigation because they were burying bodies on top of bodies. The disrepair. If you go into the cemetery, there are tombstones. When I say they're completely turned upside down, as if they were planted that way, and some of them are just knocked over and broke. And Mr. Freddie Jefferson is the one that we spoke with. He was the guy that actually exhumed her body on the day that because they were going to exhume her to do the isotope testing. Mm-hmm. And he was the one that exhumed her. And we just happened to be in the cemetery getting footage of the cemetery. And Bird said, hey, ask him if he knows where the grave is. And so I jump out the car and I walk over to him. He's cutting the grass. And I asked him, did he know where the grave was? And he was like, oh, yeah, it's back over there. And I'm like, where? Over here? And he was like, yeah. He was like, you know what? He cut the lawnmower off and he walked down with me. He said, I'll show you. I said, okay. I said, so were you here when it happened? And he's, oh, yeah, I'm the guy that actually helped exhume her body.
Oh, wow.
So it was like the clouds opened up, you know. Right. And he walked me back to, I'm like, would you mind doing an interview with us? And he said, yeah, I'll do one. So I run back to the truck and I get Bird. And I'm going to get the cameras, and me, him, and Shelby, we going down and we talk to Mr. Jefferson. He shows us exactly where her gravesite is and where the headstone is. And they dug 3 different spots to try to find her body when they were trying to dig her up for the isotope testing. And they couldn't find her. They lost her body. And it took some Washington University students to do some photo triangulations, and looking at the pictures where she was originally buried, they triangulated where she was, and they actually had to petition to dig one more time, and they actually got it done. Those students were spot on.
That was a fascinating portion of the documentary. That otherwise she would have been lost.
Correct.
And had it not been for those photographs that were taken at the time when she was first buried, which was a very small ceremony.
Yeah.
I think there were the 4 pallbearers and then the minister, and that was pretty much it. Very unfortunate. As compared to the second time, which we will get into. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but we will get into that. So when we come back in our next segment, what I'd like to talk about is why she was exhumed, and to obviously get some DNA, because there were some other, what I'm going to call developments there. Yeah. And then her second burial and comparing that to the first. And then we will go into, because there's also a book that has been written on this. From a Chicago author. So we want to talk about that and how that played into all of this here. Is that okay for you guys?
All right.
Mark, this St. Louis Baby Jane Doe is just an unbelievable kind of story.
I am looking forward to the next part of this interview, because during the documentary they talked with an author who wrote about this, and I found it interesting that throughout the interview he kept saying, "Wow, these film crew is finding out more stuff than I ever knew." So your book must not be real good. I don't mean to say it like that, but it's shucks. Did you do a lot of research in it? Yeah, for this book, and apparently not. So whatever y'all did, it sure put him in his place. I don't want to say that, but I am. But so I'm excited about the second half. Yeah.
No, I agree with you. When I was watching that, I was like, "Oh, you wrote the book. What about your research?" And I'm not calling him out, but I'm just saying his name. The name of his book was St. Louis's Baby Jane Doe, and it's by Brian Alaspa. I guess that's how it's pronounced.
Alaspa, yeah.
You had interviewed him, and then he was like, "I didn't know that, and I didn't know that." So did you know about his book ahead of time, read his book? Then how did that fit into all of this in the scheme of laying out how you were going to do the documentary and finding information?
When we were going to do the documentary, we had looked up information. We had found that he wrote the book. We did read some parts of it. I'm not sure if my dad purchased it and read that book himself. I read some stuff online. He actually reached out to him and said, "Hey, we're doing a documentary about this. Would you like to be a part of it?" And he was very excited. He said, "Yes, I would." So then we went and did the interview. And you can see in the video, he does say, "Yeah, you guys raised some great points," but information was very limited then. When he was a journalist in St. Louis, he was in University City, right down the street from it. So how he likes to put it, it was different in the ways he got information, because back then people weren't giving information because of some stuff that he has that he could not have control. So he did the best he could with the information he had. Now, fast forward to today's times, we have more information that we've researched, and he was very excited for it. It made him more interested. He actually read and reread his book.
Good.
He was very excited.
Good.
And the thing with him is, and it's not just him. I think it would be anyone. Like, I've watched a lot of YouTube stuff about this particular case. There's a lot of misinformation out, and not only that. For me, that's one of the biggest reasons I wanted to do this particular case, is because I'm from here. So I can go and do and see different things that people that aren't from here can't, especially if you're not coming here to do any research on your documentary. You're just putting it out based on information that's already out there. Then you're just going to basically just copy paste what the other people do. But for us, the way we decided to do it was we wanted to go in depth, go into the neighborhood, and Bird actually created a page on Facebook for our documentary, and so we got a lot of information through people that way, and that's how we ended up actually meeting with Eric. And he saw that, and I'm from the area. I was there when this happened.
Oh wow!
And so, and the good thing about Bird, like he takes everything with a grain. If you tell him, "Well, yeah, I was there," Bird goes back and he looks to see if any old pictures or anything, and boom, there's Eric sitting in a tree. And that's what he told him. I was in a tree when they brought her out. We got in the tree to look over the crowd.
Oh, my.
And there he is. And Mr. Jefferson, Freddie Jefferson at the cemetery, told us that he was the one that exhumed us. Bird went back and looked at the pictures, and boom, there he is. So we made sure that everything that we put out was verified. We didn't want to put out any falsities because we want to get the most impactful information out to try to solve this thing. And that's not really our goal, is not to solve it. It's just to bring attention back to it.
Shelby, you were very generous in your description of that, and Mark and I were probably a little bit more focused, laser focused on that. But technology has changed. Information, the ability to gain information has changed now. And you have a lot of people coming in, the true crime people, and they like to investigate these things and write their little book or do their little podcast or whatever they're doing.
Right.
And you're exactly right in that there's a lot of misinformation. So how did you sort through what was misinformation and the real information? Because did it collide? Did it all of a sudden, that's not what this person said, but these people are saying this? How did you sort through that?
A lot of it was through footwork and just internet searches and speaking with people from the area that were there during the time. Like when in the documentary, you'll see where they were talking about a candy store operating out of a house right next door and stuff like that. And I actually have a friend of mine he's an older guy, but I grew up around him and I've known him my entire life. And once we dropped the documentary, he reached out to me. He was like, man, I didn't know you were doing a documentary off of that, because I used to play in that house when it was vacant. It's just like Eric. So that's how we got a lot of information to find out what could be true, because we talked to people that were there, and then talking to Detective Burgoon, we got from the horse's mouth, because, he never did a documentary. He only just did news interviews.
Really?
So to sit down and talk with him, and that was, so talking with him helped us to dispel a lot of the misinformation.
So you mentioned new information. What new information did you uncover in this process?
At one point, they didn't know, they never released to the public that she had actually been sexually assaulted.
Okay.
And so when we actually obtained the medical examiner's report and were able to see that she actually was sexually assaulted, so now it's okay. Was there a rape kit done? We need to. So it's other avenues but we're trying to get some information, get the information now, so people can start looking. I don't want to give away too much.
So let's go to where we're getting to a point where it's okay. We need to find out more information. Technology's changed, and there was this not cry, but really interest in exhuming her body.
Correct.
And we had talked about in the earlier segment about Howe's trying to locate and how the Washington University students helped find out where she was located. So she gets exhumed, okay, and take it from there. What did they find out? And then let's go from the point of what they found out back to another burial.
Once she was exhumed, they sent off to different labs to do isotope testing, but really the Smithsonian did a lot and with the isotope testing. And basically they just took water from her bones to try to narrow down, due to the minerals and everything in the water in her bones, what region she could be from. And through that testing, they found out, they narrowed it down, but it still was extensive.
Yeah, still broad.
Yeah, so they were able to narrow down that she could have been from Missouri. Shoot, it was so many other surrounding.
A lot of.
And so it's like, that's a lot, but that's the most they could do, because they still don't have anything to compare her DNA to. So once they did that, we went nationwide searching. So hasn't anyone come forward? Nobody's reported a child missing. So then that opens the door for other questions. Okay, was it a parent that was involved in this, or is the parent deceased as well? So but the isotope testing did help by narrowing it, because now we know she's not over here from this part of the country, so we can now focus our search a little bit more in this area.
Exactly. Anything you want to add to that, Shelby?
For the testing, they did a lot of great work with the testing. They actually had, after she had passed away, they actually started a couple programs that they use now to help find missing children.
Really?
And things like that.
Yeah, she was one of the first to be put into.
Was it something with the NACO missing? Something that the police say. Something. NamUs, that's what. Right. And they actually started that, and she was the first case they put in there.
Wow.
So that was something that I found that was interesting, because she helped start that program.
Which something of benefit to come out of that.
Yeah, definitely.
So she gets rechecked out, another autopsy done, the DNA testing, the isotopes, and then it's a new burial in a new cemetery, and there weren't just 4 people and the minister there.
It's a lot more people.
Yeah, and actually, I believe Burgoon was a pallbearer.
Yes, he was.
And it was a over an hour ceremony, and she was a pink and white casket. And to bury her, they buried her in Calvary Cemetery in the Garden of Innocence. And from the pictures that I saw of the ceremony, it was a beautiful ceremony. And they wanted to, because of what she had went through in life and in death, they decided, we don't want it to be just another, we just bury her. So they gave her an actual ceremony.
Which was really probably the honoring point of her whole existence at that point from when she had been found. I agree, because there were so many, like we were talking about, so many stumbling blocks in the way, and it was like, what else is going to happen to this young girl? It's crazy. If you just joined us, we're talking to Lee Barber, who's assistant director, and Shelby Sosa, cinematographer, of the documentary movie Our Precious Hope, St. Louis's Baby Jane Doe. And if you want to see that, you can actually check that out at 314birdstudios.com, 314birdstudios.com, or check it out on Roku, YouTube, or Amazon Fire TV. Now, an episode about this actually appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Show. And was the detective, he was on that particular episode and talked about this, or what more do you know about that?
We don't know much about his interview with Oprah, except for what he tells us in the documentary. But Burgoon was on a campaign to just get her information out. So he was going to go wherever he needed to go.
He could do that.
Raise awareness for her.
Right.
Yeah,
which is why you guys have done the documentary and why we're talking about this. Because this little girl needs some closure. And if her family doesn't know, the family needs some closure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the people who have actually worked on the case need some closure. Because I understand that the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department have dedicated a room to St. Louis Baby Jane Doe and are still actively working the case.
That's correct.
Yes.
Yeah, they're still working it actively. And Detective Burgoon still gets calls now.
Wow.
And the only thing he can do is he refers them to the detective that's running it now. But for him to still receive calls and receive information, and for him to be because he retired from St. Louis City, he's out doing work with St. Louis County, but this case has stuck with him. He checks in every now and then just to see what's new. And I think that's a phenomenal job. I really appreciate Detective Burgoon doing everything he's done.
Did you have any difficulty getting anybody to talk about the case, or were people just more than willing to discuss and reveal the information that they knew, or did you have to pry it out of them, or people were like, no, I don't want to talk about that?
They were open to talking about it. They want to raise awareness to it. They feel like it's been a long time, as we all feel, and she needs justice.
There's a lot of people out there now, when they see that we were doing it, they were like, oh, I've been fascinated with this case. When we were on the Greenway, right where the building used to stand, there's a path that people walk. They call it the Greenway now.
Right, walking park.
And we were on the Greenway doing an interview with Eric, and a photographer that worked for the Greenway just happened to be out taking pictures on the Greenway. And actually, while we're interviewing, she stops and interviews us.
Wow.
Because she was fascinated with the case as well. And she figured it would be good publicity for the Greenway. It helped her do her job because it wasn't anybody out for real. And she was trying to get pictures of people on the Greenway utilizing the Greenway. So what better way to utilize it and to show that its utilization is there's a whole documentary being filmed on it.
That's great. And that particular building where she was found has been demolished. It's no longer there, correct?
Yes.
It's a similar building close to there, but the actual building is not there. Is it
A nursing home or a senior living building now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is my last question. What impacted you the most from this particular story? And you don't have to think right away. I'll give you a little bit of time to think about that. Personally, what impacted you? Because, folks, what we're talking about the story of our precious hope, St. Louis's Baby Jane Doe, who was a girl who was between the ages of 8 and 11, roughly 61 pounds, the height of 5 feet 10 inches, without her head and neck, and between 5'3" and 5'4", if those were still there. And her neck and head were chopped off. She didn't have any blood in her body. She was left in an abandoned building and had been murdered in another place and then brought there. This is the story we're talking about. So as we come back to this, Lee and Shelby, what impacted you the most from this story? How has this personally impacted you?
The situation from the story is what impacted me the most because I do have children, I have a dad, and I do have friends. So when I hear something like this, and this does happen in our St. Louis every day-to-day lives, unfortunately, in today's times, it really did make me feel for the person because they lost their sister, their daughter, their cousin, their loved one, and we're not able to find peace in that because they don't know who she is or they don't know any information. Mm-hmm. So I think of it as if I was lost, I would want someone to search endlessly for me, or if someone I know was lost, I would search endlessly for them, try to get the best information possible, and just to keep it going until I do get that peace. And that's what impacts me the most with it.
What impacted me the most was just the brutality of the killing. No one should lose their life to senseless violence, but to lose it in that way at such a young age. She hadn't experienced anything. But it makes me think about my own daughters. I'm a single father, and I wouldn't know what to do if I lost my children, or just one of them. So to know that baby went through what she went through alone is heart-wrenching. So and from the moment, like I said, from the moment I first heard about it, because some of the pictures that I saw when I first started looking into, I didn't see the ones that we actually have. You just saw pictures of her bound hands and little bitty fingers. But after doing this documentary and seeing everything that I saw through the research, is to know that people can be that
cruel,
brutal, and I'm at a loss for words almost. It's horrible. It's horrible.
You brought up something that I had forgotten to hit on, was the use of psychics by law enforcement to try to, they came, I think, to approach law enforcement. I don't think law enforcement approached them.
No, they reached out to law enforcement.
And that the actual sweater and what she was bound with were sent to a psychic, and they haven't gotten them back yet.
No, they said that the sweater was lost in the mail.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah. And law enforcement gets a lot of flack for that because they say, why wouldn't you just send a piece, or why would you even deal with a psychic? But at the time, like when speaking with Detective Burgoon, those are the questions we asked as well. He, like, the way he broke it down, it just made sense. He's like, well, we were at a loss. We didn't have any other option. We're going to take all the help we can get. And I don't like that happened because she had no bottoms. So that was the only physical piece of clothing she had. So it definitely, I know that was a major hit to the case, especially with DNA being where it is now.
Right.
It would have definitely been able to help.
Right. And I think things have changed over the course of time where there are procedures for if we're going to share evidence, maybe that person comes in rather than the information goes out unless it's...
And they're way more strict on the chain of, chain of custody.
Right.
You know? So, yeah, they would have to come and talk to him then and not have anything sent to him.
This has been a very shocking and I don't want to say informative but you all produced the documentary to inform people, to bring awareness to this particular girl's plight.
Absolutely.
And that maybe there's somebody out there that still knows something or knows about something else or is involved or some way, because many times somebody always sees something.
Exactly.
And maybe they just don't think about it at the time. They're not giving it any credence.
Right.
And, they were just carrying a rug in there or something, or however it was. Right. So I greatly appreciate your dad taking this project on, and Shelby, you working on this, and Lee, you getting involved with this production also. I thought that for what you guys have done for the budget, because you see all these massive budget films and what they've done, I thought you did a great job.
Thank you.
It's something that I know hopefully will bring awareness to people out there. I want to encourage you to take a look at it. You can find the Precious Hope St. Louis Baby Jane Doe available on 314birdstudios.com or on Roku, YouTube, or Amazon Fire TV. Shelby and Lee, thanks for coming on the show today.
No problem. Thank you for having us.
We appreciate you listening to this episode of St. Louis in Tune. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to the podcast to keep up on all of the latest episodes. St. Louis in Tune is produced in cooperation with KWRH 92.9 FM and Motif Media Group. For St. Louis in Tune, I'm Arnold Stricker.